Mike, thank you very much. And watching, you'll like this, watching with interest, Sir Michael Parkinson here with us on the sofa, who's very interested in the goings-on of a Rugby League World Cup Wheelchair Championship. What do you make of that?
Brutal sport.
Isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's wonderful to see that happening. It really is.
Yeah. But, Mike, thank you very much. So, Sir Michael Parkinson here. Slightly confusingly, son Michael Parkinson, who we're going to call Mike for the purposes of this. Yes, call you sir and him.
I'm call me Parky.
Parky. Let's call you Parky. The reason you're here this morning, you're welcome this morning, is you have a book out which you have jointly written, which is all about, and you were, I saw you glued to sport. You love sport, don't you? That's the thing.
Brought up on it, yeah, to meet and drink. My father was sports mad, I am too, and fortunately, all my kids, my three boys, they're all the same way as well. So it's a very boring family, really, when you come to have it. For an enlightening conversation, you know.
Well, I tell you what. Let's show everyone a picture first of all, and maybe this will give people a sense of where it all started. So you can talk us through what's happening. Who's this?
That's John William Parkinson on the right, minor. Great dad and all that. And there's my lovely mum, and that was me with a mop of hair.
And that's you, you're 2 years old or something there,
That's
are you?
right, in Scarborough, Bridlington, somewhere like that. That's where we used to go. My father went to resorts because he tested the beach for cricket, the suitability of. And we played everybody there. We used to challenge all the Lancastrians and all that sort of thing. And my father used to read the tides. So certain parts,
so you'd have enough space for
the opposition would always field in a tide up to there. So
that makes sense.
He's a cunning man, my
Which
father.
one's your father on this one? Is it
my dad's
back
in there
row?
somewhere, back row, yeah. That was a team we got together to go and play in Yorkshire on spare days and things. My dad was just cricket mad. I mean, every gap in the calendar he filled with a cricket match. And he was a very good player himself, a fast bowler. I adored him, I really did. He went down the pit and he died. You know, he went down the pit when he was 14 years of age, and he died in his early 70s through pneumoconiosis. That's happened.
And you said that actually for him, you saw a completely different side of him on a cricket pitch or watching cricket, because that was his passion, and he did what he had to do for work, and then there he lived on the cricket pitch.
Yeah, it fulfilled him. That's what it did, and it fulfilled me too. I has done all my life, and I've been able to write about it as well. It's been the marvellous thing, and no matter how famous you might be by doing television or whatever, I'm here to tell you that there's no satisfaction greater than writing a good piece, you know, because that's tough, that's difficult. What we do is easy, really, isn't it? You know, come on, compare.
I'm saying nothing. I think our job is very, very difficult. You might have found it very
difficult. I found it tough, no. But there is an immense satisfaction, as I say, you can't get through doing anything else other than write. If you write and you write a good piece, and you know it's a good piece, that's really satisfying.
Well, the difference is that you have to tell the story and provide the colour, whereas our job really is let our guests, we just facilitate the conversation. What's lovely is the joy, obviously, your dad brought to you with the sport, and you've passed it on with Mike. So you two have got together and kind of gone through Dad's old articles and kind of picked out how he told a story and peppered it with life.
Yeah, I mean, we got the idea because he did a slight photo shoot for the Daily Telegraph with Geoffrey Boycott, Uncle Geoffrey, as I call him, and Dickie Bird. And it was sort of meant to be a kind of like a reminiscence of their time playing at Shaw Lane for Barnsley Cricket Club. But what I began to see is that you had three men there who were defined by sport. I mean, without sport, Geoffrey wouldn't have had the career he had, nor my father in many ways, and Sticky as well. And I just thought it was an interesting way to look at sport and the importance it had in their life, and in many ways also then use that as a way of revisiting his old articles and trying to kind of contextualise them in a different way, because it would have been easy just to put them in a compilation, but actually try and tell a story. And what happened was, we found very clearly, was that his articles told the story of his life.
Just seeing you with Geoffrey Boycott there, has he ever forgiven you, Parky?
For running him out?
For running him out and replacing him in the team?
Geoffrey's a very complex man, and he deserves a bit more investigation than some people give him. Some more tolerance too. He's a very fine player, wonderful player, and we've been lifelong friends. And Dickie Well, Birdie was just an extraordinary character, a really wonderful man. Mythology grows around him, you know. The stories of Dickie Bird, I mean, you could write 10 books about him.
Dickie Bird, for those that don't know, the umpire with the fantastic name and a very good friend of yours.
Very good friend of mine.
But being an umpire, I guess in all sports, being an umpire, referee, is not always an easy place to be, is it?
No, it's not, but it helps if you have a sense of humour like Dickie. Dickie's impervious to insult. You can't say to Dickie anything that's nasty about him, because there's nothing that's nasty about him. He's a funny, funny man. And he's accident-prone. I mean, the stories about Dickie are one a legion, you know. There's a wonderful one where he's on holiday in Barbados, and he used to go up for his morning stroll and roll his trousers up above his knees and walk out there and brace himself tight and all that. And looked for company all the time, because Dickie needs company. And he saw this man in the distance and standing there, big, broad man. So I thought I'd go and have a chat to him, as he always did. And he walked up and he said his normal thing, which he does to anybody, Dickie Bird, first-class umpire. And the man turned around and said, Luciano Pavarotti, opera singer.
Oh.
That's not true.
It's true.
That's not.
Of course it's true.
Hold on.
How dare you challenge
Don't
your
spoil
father?
the story.
Yeah. Did you not
spoil the
hear
story.
that Sir Michael Parkinson just said, how dare you challenge
Yes,
your father?
I'm
And I will
sorry,
add,
man.
on national television,
I'm not
how
accepting
very
that.
dare.
Pavarotti. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Anyway, yes. No, that's
Really?
totally true.
I believe every word. I believe it. Don't
I
spoil
could
it.
tell you did. I mean, I'd hoot you with that. I could tell that.
I think it's fantastic. What did I read a story about on a cricket pitch. Dickie Bird came out and he was handed a phone.
He was. Alan
As
Lamb.
Alan Lamb.
Alan Lamb
Do you
handed
want
the
to?
phone.
Can you tell us that story, because it's a cracker, isn't it?
Alan Lamb used to do terrible things to Dickie Bird. Alan Lamb he once put all his wheels, took all the wheels of his car and put his car up on bricks. He also once locked him in the dressing room, so they had to break in to get him
From
out.
the
get him
outside.
From the outside.
Right.
The best one was he came out there and handed Dickie a mobile phone. And he said, what do you want me to do? They said, well, if someone rings, answer it. And so the phone rang, Dickie picked it up, and it was both of them saying, could you tell that idiot Lamb to get on with it?
And this all happened literally on the pitch.
In the middle of a test match. Things have changed.
Can I, Parky, dare I say it? Some people don't love cricket, okay?
I know. I feel sorry
You're aware
for
of that, and they've never got the bug as you have. But you say it is the best of all sports. It brings most to the
I
table.
think it's the most complex of all sports. It's the most satisfying from my point of view. But as a journalist, it is the most wonderful sport to write about, because it's full of wonderfully extraordinary characters, and it's a game that engages every part of you, of a human being. I mean, I could go on forever, but I won't, because you go. I don't have to justify cricket at all. I fell in love with it through my father. I've written about it. I've written some of the best stuff I've ever done. And this book actually is interesting because, you know, if you appear on television, as we do, and you get to be famous and all that sort of thing, there's a danger you might actually swallow all that and sort of think, oh, that's what it's all about. If you can write, it's different. I mean, it's much more difficult to be able to write well than to perform well in television.
Can I
mean, it's
point
a
out-
different thing, I know, but it's much, from my point of view, I'm much more proud of what I've done as a writer than I am as a TV person. I'd regard that as being something else, something separate.
Curiously, I'd always assumed that you were a journalist first, and that was the thing. And the fame thing didn't mean anything to you. But then I read in the book that when you were a child, all you wanted to be was famous.
All I wanted to be was to marry Marilyn Monroe.
Okay, and that didn't happen.
No.
Lauren Bacall.
Oh, well, that's another story.
Okay.
And my lips are sealed.
All right. But you wanted to be famous.
Well, everybody wants to be famous. Everybody wants to be recognised and that sort of thing. But, you know, when the thing is that when you've got something else to do as well, then you're able to sort of compare the two things that you're able to do. And I've had far more satisfaction out of people saying you can write a bit than he was good on television.
But it gave you all the foundations, didn't it, for being very successful on television?
Yeah, I mean,
and for being given access to some of the best names
I'm
in
not
sport.
complaining at all.
Yeah.
To the best.
Names in sport.
yeah,
Well,
so-
I mean, we've got clips, and tell me, how do you feel? Do you get sick of seeing the TV clips?
Do I get sick of it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
Why?
I can't, because I don't recognise the person.
What, you?
Yeah,
You don't
it's
recognise
a
yourself?
disguise. This is a disguise. All of it. You're not yourself at all. It changes you. No matter how consider you might be of the problems of being famous, it changes you, and it's bound to. Just people's reaction to you, and it makes you sometimes a worse person than you are. Writing never did that at all. Writing challenges you all the time to actually do it properly. And if you can read a piece, there's a piece in the book that we've done. I wrote a piece about Fred Truman, a friend of mine and a great cricketer, which I think that if I could justify myself as a writer, as a human being, that would be the thing I get. Read that. And tell me, do you think that's rather good? Because if you do, I'm very happy.
That fame thing is really interesting, the way you talk about it. I'm just curious. I don't know how old you are, and at what point
how
did
old do you think I am?
No, I'm not going to do that.
I'm
not going to do that. But what I was going to ask was,
Yes.
at what point did you... So Dad's dad.
Yes.
What point did you know that Dad was famous, or was he always
I
that
was
way?
very, very lucky because, firstly, my father got famous, in inverted commas, when he was a mature man. So his head wasn't turned. He also he's got a very, very sensible Irish wife who basically told him very much that, he shouldn't get big-headed. And also he had kids, so his head was never going to be turned. And also, my father's idea towards fame was to make people who were famous to find out what they wanted to do. I also lived in an era when there wasn't any social media. So when I went to school, I went to normal schools, the kids of my age didn't watch my father. They weren't interested in my father. They didn't know who he was. So therefore, I never had that pressure. I think if he was as famous as he was when I was growing up and I was his son now, it would be a very, very different experience and not one I would be very comfortable with at all. So in that sense, I think he's handled, particularly, if you think about what the viewing figures used to get in the 70s, 14, 15 million people on an average. It's very easy to get your head turned, and it never really happened.
When people talk to you about your dad's kind of TV interviews and stuff, what do they ask you about?
Well, they always want to ask the ones that he absolutely hates. I mean, he want to ask about Meg Ryan, they want to ask about Emu. And as he said, I mean, the greatest antidote to ever thinking that, somehow you're a big famous star is that what you're going to be remembered for is being attacked by a glove puppet. So this is the point. So and what's very interesting is that we do a show together, a live theatre show together, and also obviously I produced him, and we did the documentary Parky at 50 last year. And when we were asked to find out what the best interview we wanted to do was, it was one that no one really knows, and it's Professor Jacob Bronowski. Now, when you say that to people, they go, "Who's that?" And he was the guy who did Ascent of Man, the documentary series, and it was the one interview that frankly went from A to Z, beginning to end exactly as my father planned it, and it's an extraordinary piece of television.
If you were Parky, if you were now to given a clean sheet of paper as to who you would wish to, if you wanted to interview anyone, who would be on that list? That top three right now.
Oh, it's impossible to answer, really, isn't it? Mr. Musk, I suppose, would be.
I thought you might say that.
Would be interesting. I mean, I can't quite work him out, can you? You look at him, there's many people there, aren't there?
It's partly that thing, though, isn't it? Maybe you say Elon Musk because, although we see him quite a bit, he doesn't get interviewed much, does he? You don't get to see under the skin very much. And that was maybe the time that you worked in, with Ali and other people like that. That was part of it, it was a bit new to hear and see them talking and explaining themselves a bit.
Ali was impossible to interview.
Why?
You didn't get anywhere near him at all. He'd let you in so far, and then the performance would start, the act would follow, which is a great pity because he's a bright man. He was able to look after himself, of that there is no doubt. But the sadness was that he was taken over by people who used him. He used him badly, actually.
So when you were done, we were seeing it now, the pictures we're showing of one of those interviews. I mean, literally, during the interview, are you conscious of the fact that you're not making progress and he's just
I'm conscious of the fact I'm losing. that was the thing with him. I mean, there's no way. On the other hand, I mean, I came to actually admire him greatly, just particularly toward the end, where he bore that illness with great courage and great style and some humour as well. He became a different, nicer man, if that was possible. But I genuinely felt sorry for him because the pressures upon him from all varying parts of a propaganda war, if you like, were intolerable, I thought, and explained an awful lot about some of his behaviour. I mean, to have met him as many times as I did was an honour, I regard it being, and a mystery which I never solved.
Isn't that interesting?
Did you go in then, when you went in to do interviews, as if it was combat? Because you said you were annoyed that you didn't win.
Not every time, of course not. I mean, every different interview was different, and everyone you required a different approach, maybe. But with Ali, there's no doubt about it. I was in the ring with him. I mean, you know, I was losing every time. You know, he was an extraordinary character. He really was, and I just think that was one of the great blessings of the job I was able to do, to meet him.
I bet your directors never shouted at you in your ear, telling you, "You've got to finish now. You've got to finish now." I bet they treated you with more respect.
No,
didn't they?
no, not at all. You're blathering on. You say you're very boring.
I just had it in our ears. Sir Michael Parkinson, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. And Mike, thank you very much as well. Sir Michael's book, My Sporting Life, Memories, Moments and Declarations, is out today. You're watching Breakfast.